Parliamentary Secretary Eric Chua.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Budget 2022 hits the refresh button on the social contract that Singaporeans have with our country, our home. Through the budget, we seek to achieve a more equitable distribution of finite resources we have so that those who need more help get the assistance they need, and those who can afford to do so, to spare some help, do so. Enough has been said about how in Singapore, our people are our only resource. While I applaud the focus on strengthening our social compact, we can do much more for our young people. Every youth has potential, and this applies equally to youth who are on the fringes of social norms and the law, many of whom would come from the more vulnerable segments of our society. I'd like to speak on two broad trends of youth sexual offending and youth attitudes towards drugs. The overall number of youth offenders has fallen by 43% in the past decade. In numerical terms, that translates to 4,174 in 2010 to 2,367 in 2020. The overarching statistic looks dandy, but there's been a worrying upward trend in the number of youth offenders who committed outrage of modesty and rape offences between 2016 and 2020. More specifically, from 109 cases in 2016 to 162 cases in 2020. Now, what drives our young people to commit these offences? A 2015 study of 168 male youth sex offenders provided glimpses to better understand the motivations behind youth sexual offending in Singapore. The study notes that the most common motivation behind youth sexual offending in Singapore appeared to be attempts at seeking pleasure. Well, there are no surprises here, given adolescence is often associated with exploration, sensation-seeking, and impulse activity. We need to better understand the potential triggers behind such offences. All in all, the devil's in the details. There are plenty we do not yet comprehend. What are other contributing factors that feeds the youth's impulse to commit a sexual offence? For instance, how does the consumption of pornographic material impact our youth's behaviours? Singapore is a hyper-connected digital city. Being digital natives who navigate the virtual world with perhaps much more ease than those amongst us who are digital migrants, the risks and dangers that our youth face are real. A recent study by Google found that at 8 years of age, the Singaporean child is amongst the youngest in the world to receive his or her own first internet device. Couple that with a study by a social service agency, Touch Cyber Wellness, which found in a recent survey of over 800 youth aged 13 to 15 that as many as 50% of those surveyed have watched or read sexually explicit materials. And some were as young as 7 when they were first exposed to such materials. On a related note, how many amongst us Asian parents have the courage to start the conversation with our children about the birds and the bees? Members will agree that for many parents, the butterflies that such conversations bring to our stomachs probably means that many will choose to shun it completely. Our youth's interaction with sexually explicit materials and how families choose to deal with this awkward issue are but only a couple of slices in what is a complex, multidimensional, but unfortunately little understood issue. And we'll need to invest much more to better understand this nascent trend so that we can better design appropriate upstream interventions. Our youth's liberal attitudes toward drugs is also a cause for concern. Between 2016 and 2020, a noticeable uptrend in the total number of youth drug abusers was observed. This number rose from 277 in 2016 to 376 in 2019. The dip observed for 2020 to 305 could have been a function of border closures and movement restrictions brought about by the pandemic, and that could have impacted supply and demand. Anecdotally, my conversations with both youth as well as youth workers have been alarming, as many shared how soft or recreation drugs were being pushed in venues familiar to our youth. A 2015-2016 survey by the National Council Against Drug Abuse, NACADA, also found that over the years, youth were increasingly permissive when it came to drugs. Such a trend, though concerning, should perhaps not come as a surprise. Globally, attitudes towards drug use have been shifting. Our digitally savvy youth consumes a vast amount of what they know about the world through social networking sites. A 2017 Youth and Perception Survey, Public Perception Survey, by NACADA found that amongst youth aged 13 to 21, 16% were open to trying drugs for a new experience if they were overseas or if it does not affect their daily routine. Clearly, youth attitudes toward drugs appear to be slowly but steadily liberalizing. But make no mistake, there's nothing soft about soft drugs like methamphetamine, or otherwise known as ice, glass, crystal, or cannabis, otherwise known as marijuana, pot, grass, weed. These substances are not less addictive, nor are they less harmful, as many young abusers misunderstand. The Central Narcotics Bureau's preventive drug education programs have reached out to youth both within and outside of schools. Despite our best efforts, how else can we drive home the message among youth of the harms that drug abuse brings? This is hence a second area of concern for which I propose we will need to resource more heavily in the coming year so that we do not lose our younger generations to the scourge of drugs. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do not purport to have any quick answers to the two broad youth trends I've highlighted above, but our response will have to be one that is not merely led by the government alone. To ensure our young ones do not fall prey to the perils of drugs and sexual offending, our response must be one that involves a much deeper understanding and appreciation of our youth's psyche, a coordinated and deliberate movement across society to combat these ills afflicting our future generations, and an openness in evolving our approaches to engage and empower our young people. Notwithstanding the points I've raised above, I support the budget.